huge thanks to everyone who tunes in to Dr. VGP's podcast. We've received the YouTube silver play button for reaching 100,000 subscribers and counting. We sincerely thank you for being part of this wonderful journey with us. Click on the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to notify you with all our future podcast contents. Thank you again.
Hello and welcome to Dr. VGP Talk Show.
My family was actually a proud Chinese peasants, okay? Vice President J.D. Vance is not here today, but I just want to mention it, you know. Like when I grew up in the rural part of China, I remember when I was a little guy, I asked my dad for a pet. So he gave me a pet tree. I really loved it. You know? I pulled it out to see how the roots are coming every day. You know? Turns out I have a yellow thumb. But agriculture is of great importance for both China and the United States. So the next panel is fittingly called the Agriculture Forum. And let's please give a big hand for our moderator, former chairman of the Chicago Board of Trade, Mr. Charles P. Carey. Mr. Charles Carey. Oh yeah, please come up. Yeah. The podium is yours. Oh, actually, Mr. Carey, could you come up and introduce the rest of the panel? I wanted to take that job, but they won't let me anymore. Mr. Carey.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, is this thing working? Yeah, it's working. Anyway, I don't know which order, because I didn't think this was going to be my job, but now that it's my job, I'll do what I got to do. So, Secretary Glickman, would you mind coming up? former Secretary of Agriculture under President Clinton, very knowledgeable in this space, and we're looking to share some insights here. Jim, would you like to come on? Jim Sutter has been in the industry a long time, almost as long as me, and he's here to talk a little bit about the U.S. Soybean Export Council. So, Jim, thanks for being here today. Joe, come up wherever you want. You know, you got microphones. So, Joe's representing the Farm Bureau and is a farmer himself, so he's very familiar with the issues that we have at hand, and I think we'll get some insight on from a policy standpoint, from farmers' viewpoint, and somebody who's very close to the export market and the trying to build a relationship between China and U.S. So anyway, with that, I'll kick it off. Sit down here, if you don't mind. These guys like to talk a lot, so I'm going to sit down. But,
you hope we like to talk a lot.
well, yeah, exactly. Take the pressure off. So, but Jim, I know that you spent a little time in China recently. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the United States Soybean Export Council?
Sure. Thank you very much, Charlie.
Sure.
The U.S. Soybean Export Council, or USEC as we call it, is a membership organization that represents the whole export supply chain of soybeans, all the way from farms through the export companies and everything in between, including railroads and seed companies and all kinds of organizations that are involved one way or another in the export of soybeans. Our job is to represent the U.S., this group of stakeholders internationally. We touch about 90 countries every year with our programs, so there's a lot of places where U.S. soybeans get exported to. But the number one market is China. And you may have noticed, soybeans have been in the news a little bit recently between U.S. and China. So who knew a few years ago that soybeans were such a diplomatic tool as they have become? But what we do in our organization is we try to educate people on how to use soy. In very basic markets. Our organization started in 1982 doing work in China. I wasn't there at that point in time. But they started working with people who produce hogs and chickens and fish and tried to take technology from the United States or from other countries and introduce it so it would help them be able to be more successful in their businesses in what they were doing. And, you know, the ulterior motive, obviously, was to be able to grow demand. And so that started in 1982. At that point in time, China was a small exporter of soy, a small net exporter. It was only in 1995 that China first started importing a little bit of soy. And then in the year 2000 or so, they really became, their growth in soy imports really took off. And since that time, China has grown to be the #1 export market for all countries that export soy. The three big exporters are the US, Brazil, and Argentina. And for all that soy that goes into international trade, approximately 60% of it ends up in China. So they are bigger than all the rest of markets combined, which is, you know, it's really amazing the size that market has come to. So our organization, we have an office in Beijing and an office in Shanghai, and we have about 20 people that work for us full-time in China, and we operate programs, you know, that they've changed a lot since 1982. But the basic premise is the same. We want to bring the best technology from the rest of the world, make it available to Chinese industries, and we believe that if we're doing that, it'll help us to help people there to understand the difference between U.S. soy and soy grown in other places, because there truly are differences, and then build a preference for U.S. soy. Now that obviously gets interrupted when we get into a trade war situation. And back, just one more little comment about, and then we'll get into more of this, I'm sure, but why soy has been such a hot topic. You know, 60% of our crop is exported. So 60% has a lot of uses when you talk about soybeans. But 60% of the U.S. soybean production is exported as either beans, soybean meal, or soybean oil. So international markets are really important to soy farmers, and China is the #1 market. So you can imagine the political pressure that can be applied if you shut off the market for soybeans to go into the #1 market for our industry. And farmers, as we'll hear from Joe, have a very effective voice in politics in the United States. So I think that's why, unfortunately, soy gets caught up in these political situations. So that's the problem that we face. And we'll get into more good news, I think, in terms of what's happened recently. But I'll stop there, Charlie, and let you move on to another question.
Well, I have one more question for you. Part of the driver, right now, we're addressing geopolitical concerns.
Absolutely, yeah.
And driving this policy that for 40-some years, we didn't have to deal with it because we were just looking for more customers for our farmers. But how much do you think the increase in demand that has come from China and all the world is about an improving economy there, an improving diet, and demand for protein?
I think that is what has driven this fantastic growth. It's taken China from being a small exporter to 60% of the global demand for soy, and big demand for many other commodities as well. I think it has been the growth in the economy in China, the fantastic growth in improvement in nutrition, improvement in diets, and I'm looking out at lots of people who have spent time in China, who know a lot about China, and people in China love to eat meat. And if you're going to produce meat, and if you're going to do that effectively, you need soy and you need other agricultural crops. But soy meal goes into that. And then, of course, you need the oil that comes from a soybean to cook it all in. So I think that's really what's driven that demand. And we get caught up in this geopolitical situation. But we're excited about the future demand in China as well. So we've seen this big run-up in demand, and there's a lot of talk about, is China's population leveling out, maybe even starting to decline slightly? Does that mean that they will slow down or decline as an importer of agricultural commodities, of soy? We had a study done, an econometric analysis done by Virginia Tech University, and for the next 10 years, starting 24 through 34, they project that China will continue to be the fastest growing, or the largest growth market, globally, not necessarily fastest on a percentage basis, but largest growth market over the next 10 years, followed by markets in Latin America, followed by markets in South Asia and Southeast Asia. But China will continue to grow and will continue to be a big growth market. So I have a lot of optimism for the future, and that's why we really need to get this relationship on track and make sure that we can have a strong win-win relationship rather than a lose-lose relationship like we've been going through the last few months.
Thank you. And I think I'm a little bit optimistic about a thaw in relations. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But Dan, I would like your viewpoint, seeing as he faced his own challenges when he was Secretary of Agriculture. He understands what's going on here, and he understands the farmers' issues. So please share your thoughts.
Well, thanks, Charlie. Well, first of all, I'm an ex-retired American politician. Okay, which means I can say anything I want and nobody can do anything to me. All right? Okay. But let me say this. I have had multiple careers, and I've been in China many times. First as a congressman from Kansas, where we're not the largest soybean state in the country, but we're up there pretty high. Yeah. Second, I was chairman of the Motion Picture Association of America, so I was chief lobbyist for Hollywood for 7 years. Now, you want to know why? I said, well, I used to grow popcorn, and then I sold popcorn. Usually gets a bigger laugh than that. Then, of course, I was Secretary of Agriculture, responsible for all of our programs. So I'm pleased to hear the positive news, but I would tell you these are really rough times for U.S.-China relationships. And I think both countries have exacerbated with the rhetoric that's too high. And we all need to tone down this rhetoric. I don't know as much about how it's happening in China, but it's there. And I also know in the U.S. that especially the U.S. Congress has had excessive rhetoric, negative, hostile rhetoric from both sides of the aisle. And to some extent, I think China has taken the place of the old Soviet Union as the common enemy of America. China is not the enemy of the United States. China, okay? China is a serious competitor to the United States, and sometimes your competitors don't play the game fairly, and you have to call them out, and you have to make sure that they don't continue to do that. And sometimes you can be wrong too, in terms of what you're particularly doing. Now, I would just make a couple of quick comments. One has to do with the President of the United States and his trade and tariff policies. They reverse a trend since the Second World War ended, basically, of America seeking open markets and the ability to export our products around the world, full stop. Now, the President's rationale is that the United States is not being treated fairly, and that the tariffs and trade barriers on our products are too high, and in some cases, he's right. But he lurches from pro-trade to anti-trade, and sometimes it's difficult to figure out which side of the picture he's on. And so I think that the recent tariff policies of the United States, although they're changing on a day-to-day basis, but I think that they have reversed a trend where America has had an engaged role in the world, especially on economic issues. I think it's a lot of the President's policies are a mistake, and I think the tariffs have hurt our farmers as well, because they have landed an era of unpredictability into the equation about where we can sell our crops. Jim just talked about 60% of our soybean crop has to be exported. We don't have that's all. We use about 45% of our crop, and then it has to be exported or else it would go to waste. And the tariffs have not only engineered a deviation from that, but I think they've encouraged China and some of our other trading partners to go elsewhere beyond the United States, which hurts our farmers, but not just our farmers, it hurts agriculture, it hurts our economy generally. One of my goals is to point this out as a former politician and to indicate that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can call to the public's notice problems with respect to, let's say, China or any other country's way of dealing with trade, but at the same time, we have to encourage a positive relationship. We're the two largest economic powers in the world. We're not going to go, or God forbid, we can't go to war with each other, and we have to figure out ways to cooperate, and we can talk more about that later. I would have to say something that recently the President announced, along with the President Xi, a new agreement on soybean exports. And it's great. I think it's 12 million tons this year and 25 million over the next 2 years, or next 3 years. Okay. The question is are the Chinese serious in terms of those agreed amounts to buy? And are there any enforcement mechanisms out there to ensure that maybe we're not just in a lull right now, and that because this will have a lot to do with American attitudes towards China. If for some reason China doesn't honor its commitments, that's serious political problems in the United States. And, it's ironic that some of the strongest supporters of U.S.-China relationships are in the heartland, are in the farm areas, are in the area. I come from Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are the states where people realize how important these trade relationships are. So I guess I'll talk more as Charlie asks questions, but I think the bottom line for me is the relationships need to be moved to a much more positive note. China is not the cause of all the problems that America is facing. I think too often the rhetoric is too vitriolic on both sides of the aisle. We need to figure out where we can work together, and we do it in a lot of ways. I mentioned entertainment, or science, or medicine, or space, and agriculture, and I'm sure there are other ways as well. So as the two biggest countries in the world, we ought to act like adults and not like babies, and not criticize each other for anything that happens in the world, whether it's internally or in China or in the United States. Thank you, Charlie.
Dan, what year did you start in Congress?
1812, no,
Was that after the British left or what happened?
1976.
So here's a gentleman who just shared his thoughts, and as you've just witnessed, he doesn't hold back. He tells you exactly how things are from his point of view, and we appreciate that because we need free markets, we need fair trade, free trade, and I think that's the only way that the citizens of both countries will benefit if we can reopen the dialogue and get to a point where commerce can take place. So, but
Charlie, if I just might mention one
Go
more
ahead.
thing. So I'm old enough to remember when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. I don't know if anybody in this room is old enough to remember that. Probably not.
I was trading it.
Oh, you were trading?
Yeah.
Okay. Almost as old. Anyway.
Limit down.
So they invaded Afghanistan, and then President Carter responded two ways. We withdrew American participation in the Olympics of 1980, and we embargoed wheat. We no longer had any relationships with China, and we no longer were with Russia, and we were no longer selling them wheat. Let me tell you, the consequence of that was that for the last 40 to 50 years, the party of Jimmy Carter, my party, the Democratic Party, the rural areas of America just turned on Mr. Carter and turned on the Democrats. And it's created an environment where you have much more of a rural-urban split than you used to have. And it's not healthy. And Russia, of course, has not made it easy at all with Ukraine and all the other perfidious activities that they have done. These matters, relationships have political consequences. If we can work through this soybean agreement that you have some leadership on and Joe is very much involved in, if we can try to rebuild the U.S.-China relationship, because we're natural allies, we're not natural enemies, then I think it will have great positive political consequences in the U.S. for future Chinese-American relationships.
Thank you, Dan. Joe's from Iowa. So anyway, he's going to tell us a little bit about what he does, and he's connected to the Farm Bureau, a lot of farmers, so he can kind of share with us the sentiment these days and what we hope to get out of these new set of discussions between the U.S. and China.
Thank you, Charlie. So, as Charlie has said, I'm a farmer from Iowa, been farming for 42 years. Started out raising hogs, and I had just a quarter of a section of land, and the corn I raised, I fed to my pigs, and then the pigs went to town. So I never hauled any corn off of the farm. It was always just selling the pigs. And as I've gotten older, I'm more of a grain farmer now. So being a hog farmer is hard work and physical, and that's for the young people. So as I've transitioned to being a crop farmer, it gave me more time to actually see how the politics of agriculture are in Iowa. What they do in Des Moines and what they do in DC affects my little farm in Iowa. I'm a fifth-generation farmer, so it's near and dear to me. I don't want to be the farmer that has lost the farm. And don't worry, my farm is in good shape. But there are farms that, especially the younger generation, they don't have as many assets behind them. And so with the high cost of inputs and the low prices that are available today, they're struggling a bit. And as a dad and a grandpa, I want to make sure that my son and my grandson have the ability to farm. So about 15, 20 years ago, the Iowa Farm Bureau, which is an organization that really looks at policy. And I was only interested in policy in the county and state level initially. And so I went to my meetings. I wanted to make sure that my local politics, my local politicians weren't charging too much in property taxes. There wasn't negative regulations for a farm to expand or do well. And so I decided that I needed to be a voice for that. So I joined the Farm Bureau, and fast forward to today, I'm a board of director for the State Farm Bureau now. So at the state level, we look more about what the state is doing to our farms. And then we also like to go to DC and make sure that federal policy isn't hurting what we're doing on the farm as well. Since I've been with the Farm Bureau, it allowed me also to be a liaison to the Iowa Soybean Association. And with that, I met Jim Sutter, who is a fantastic man on the Soybean Export Council. That guy could sell ice to Eskimos. He is going around the world really promoting the beans that we grow in Iowa, number one, and in the country, and just showing everybody that we have the best beans in the world. And I think one of the questions that this room would have for me is, okay, and I get this all the time, Trump said he was going to tariff everybody, and it was going to hurt farmers because the first thing they were going to retaliate against us was with ag products. They're the easiest target. And agriculture in general in the United States supported Trump because things were maybe going down the wrong road in trade, and we felt like, could it get any worse? And when he was president 4 years ago, he did try to support us and have our backs when policy hurt our prices on the farm. And so I think we have that hope and trust in this administration right now that although we're in rough waters currently, that hopefully there'll be light at the end of the tunnel. And the American farmer, the Iowa farmer, the eastern Iowa farmer does want to trade with the world. Politics gets in the way of that sometime, and I hope we can get through this. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Joe. Jim, I know you were in China recently, and a couple of questions. One is, how did soybeans become the topic of discussion between President Trump and President Xi? And then could you tell us a little bit about that visit and what your feelings are coming back from there?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Charlie. Thank you. Well, I think we've touched on soybeans and the important political aspect that they have, because you have all the U.S. farmers that grow soybeans, and then you have China as such a big market for soybeans. So there is a lot of sort of natural leverage that soybeans can play in a political discussion or in a discussion between these two leaders of these two big countries. And I think soybeans, I think our farmers here in the U.S. have done a really good job highlighting the importance of China as a market for U.S. soy. And you know, you've seen that in numerous press interviews, newspaper articles, all kinds of things talking about the damage to U.S. soybean farmers by the effective blockade when a big tariff differential went on U.S. soy versus other origins. So I think that's how they became such a hot topic. And I think, when President Trump was elected, I think it's no secret that farmers were big supporters of President Trump, and he listens to his constituents. And so when they kept kind of hammering home, hey, we need to get something done on soybeans, I think he had a short list of topics that he wanted to talk about with President Xi. Fentanyl, rare earths, soybeans. Wow, who would think the soybeans would get onto that point? But it did. And I think it's now become sort of an example, of sort of a symbol of agriculture trade, and maybe even trade more generally between the United States and China. So if I talk about, so I was in China just last week, and I went there as part of a U.S. ag trade mission. We had 13 different agricultural groups that were there, everything from ginseng to wheat to cotton to soybeans. And you know, some of the commodities are small, some are large. We were all there together, and we were there to highlight to both Chinese government officials and Chinese industry people the importance that we place on the relationship, the long-term relationship that we want to have, that we've had and we want to continue to have into the future. And I was, you know, we'd planned this mission, and we were going, and it also coincided with the CIIE, the China International Import Expo, this big trade show they have where they highlight the importance of China as a large importer. So we went to that event, and we had planned to go even before the Korean event happened, before the Korean presidential meeting. So it was really good timing because that happened just the week before. So the mood was very high, I would say. We really felt welcomed to be there. I felt like there was a very strong commitment to honor the agreement. You know, as Secretary Glickman said, it's important that this agreement be honored. And I think many people will be watching it. I think especially when you have a presidential level agreement, as they made, it's really important that it get followed, or it's really important in a bad way if it doesn't get followed. So it could have very negative consequences, I think, or a negative impact on future trading relations if it fell apart. So I'm optimistic that there will be this follow-through and this agreement will be honored. Sure, there'll be some changes and some bumps along the way, but I think there's a lot of goodwill, and I think that both sides really want to build upon that. The CIIE is this huge event. Some of you, I'm sure, have been there. It's like a trade show on super steroids with all different kinds of things being demonstrated that China imports. And in the agricultural hall, you know, there are companies from all over the world, but I read, and I didn't have a way to audit this, but I had read that the U.S. presence at the CIIE was the largest single country presence. And that takes in all different kinds of things. So I think the U.S. showed up very well. I think we're at a really interesting time and potentially a very good spot between U.S. and China relations if we can just hold it together. And I think I'm certainly taking it as my job, representing the U.S. soybean industry, to try to work with both sides and remind them how important this relationship is and how important following through on this agreement is and seeing progress made. So Charlie, it turned out to be a very positive experience to have been there. I think it was very important to have all of these ag groups there at the same time, and we want to continue to build on that.
Sure, thanks. Dan, you mentioned Afghanistan, which I have a pretty good memory of. The grains, the only thing that wasn't down a limit was soybeans, because we didn't sell any soybeans to the Russians. We sold them wheat and corn. They were limit down for a couple of days. The market was closed. Gold hit all of $855 an ounce, and silver was $50 an ounce because the Hunt brothers were involved. But anyway, that's ancient history. That's my history class for today. Dan, my question for you is, you served as Secretary of Agriculture. How would you compare the job today to when you were doing the job, and what were your biggest challenges as Secretary of Agriculture?
Well, first of all, I worked for a president named Clinton, who knew more about agriculture than probably any president since Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so I was telling you all, Jim and Joe, that he calls me one day when I'm secretary and asks me to raise the loan rate on a certain commodity, not soybeans. And I'm thinking to myself, would any president of the United States call their Secretary of Agriculture personally and said, raise the loan rate on this crop? And so I did, because I wanted to keep my job. And anyway, so it was a hell of a lot easier. First of all, I was a congressman for many years, and I had good relationships to Congress. And when it comes to agriculture and food policy, historically, the Congress has been the leader, not the president. The Congress has been the innovator, the institution of our government that really drives farm, food, and agricultural policy. At least when I was there, we thought tariffs was in the congressional bailiwick, not unilaterally within the executive branch bailiwick. So, and the other thing is that for those of you who study the American political system, the partisanship that we have now in our political system affects everything. And, I mean, most members of Congress are decent people and trying to do a good job. But we're in the environment now where if the Democrats say the skies are blue, the Republicans would say the skies are red. And so I think it's, you know, it's such an entirely different experience that we could get along pretty well back in the 70s and 80s, but it started to turn in the 90s. It used to not affect agriculture. Agriculture used to be the most bipartisan aspect of American policy. But now it's tied up with other things, such as, you know, legitimate issues, the supply chain issues, the critical, you know, rare earth minerals, as you mentioned, intellectual property enforcement, rights enforcement, which I dealt in the motion picture industry, and, you know, geopolitical issues like the South China Sea and other kinds of things. So today it's very difficult to separate agriculture from these other issues, which could, you know, if there was some incident, for example, off the South China Sea, it could affect agriculture almost instantaneously, whereas I'm not sure that would have been true, because in my case, I think Bill Clinton would have been on the phone and would have tried to have worked things out. And so, you know, I guess what I'm saying, it wasn't heaven on earth when I was there, by any stretch of the imagination. But it was better because our government was better able to solve its problems. But things do turn. You know, I just want to tell you this. My belief is our political system is still very resilient, and notwithstanding some of the things you see between President, Congress, and other places, ultimately, the American people, if they see the system's going badly, will call for change. And that change comes in elections every 2 years. And we have our midterm elections a year from right now. And so we had some elections in the last 2-3 weeks. They showed that maybe there is not this enormously pro-Trump sentiment out there that maybe we thought there was. And the president's smart enough to try to respond to that as well. So anyway, that's a broad lesson in the fact that the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. It's agriculture is just not agriculture. It's connected to everything else.
It's big business. So what'd you raise the loan on?
Raised their loan
Rice, cotton?
on rice.
Rice?
Rice.
I figured Arkansas rice. Yeah, I
rice.
figured that.
There's the American political system that plays, because Mr. Clinton was a good old boy from Arkansas, and he had a lot of friends in rice, cotton, and soybeans. So obviously somebody calls him up, and then he calls me up, and then our system works the way it's supposed to, I guess.
Sure. Well, as you said, the people that live in the White House, just, they bow that's not a permanent position. So it can change every 4 years, every 8 years, whatever, but we all get to make a vote. As far as the situation now with some dialogue at least taking place between the U.S. and Chinese leadership, what's the sentiment in Iowa regarding the future for soybeans and other, I mean, there's a lot of corn grown in Iowa too, a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans. So, but I'd like your thoughts, Joe, on what you hear from the Iowa farmer.
Okay, first I'm going to talk about how we did this year. So the weather was super conducive to growing corn and soybeans. So we had a good crop. I thought it would be the record crop of my lifetime by the way the crop looked in August. But disease came in and took the top end off of the corn. So we were off by about 30 bushels an acre, which was kind of sad because I was really looking forward to jumping in the combine and having just a big yield. The beans, on the other hand, were very good. We had good beans. The only thing that I will knock on them was probably it got a little dry. It didn't rain, and so we like to harvest at 13%, and they got down into the 8 and 9% range. So these beans are going to keep very well for a long time because they're super dry. The sentiment about trade in Iowa is we've been hopeful. When the tariffs were put on, we knew that we are on the front lines and we are going to be the retaliated parties against the tariffs. And so we've been hopeful, we've been waiting, and we were glad to see that both of our leaders got together, had a dialogue, and positive things were said that came out of it. Looking at the markets today, perhaps there was some good news because they were up 14 or 15, so it was awesome. 5 minutes, got it.
Is that what it said? Perfect. That's all right, we're okay. What do you think's going to come in the report tomorrow about, will it show that you lost 30 bushels per acre in corn? I think they're going to trim it. What do you think, Bill?
You know, I think they are going to trim the yield, and if they don't on this one, they surely will on the next one. And perhaps they'll take a few bushels off the bean crop because, as I said before, they were dry, and dry beans are less bushels in total.
Okay, thanks. Well, we've got our time limit here now, so any closing remarks, gentlemen, as far as what we covered, kind of a broad range of topics, but primarily focused on the U.S.-Chinese relationship, and I think we're all hopeful that things improve.
Charlie, can I just make one comment? And that
Please.
is, so I think the purpose of this meeting is very important. Both countries understand each other better, understand where they're coming from. I do note that I'm told that it is the amount of these cooperative visits between China and the United States have, for a while, come to a total stop. I'm glad to hear that agriculture and agriculture groups are, in fact, going. But I was involved in an organization where it was almost impossible to get our people in a visit. It was with a think tank into China. So one of the things we have to work on is these bilateral delegations of political, cultural, business, entertainment to restart. Both sides need to work on this because the impediments are actually coming from both sides the way I hear it. And the same thing is true with university talent and everything else. The number of Chinese students, I'm told, at U.S. universities has dropped in the last year or so. I think there have been restrictions on U.S. students going into China as well. This is a kind of mutual thing. But these people-to-people exchanges are really important. And what affects agriculture, if you're in the rare earth business, it relates to that. And if you're in the science or math business. But I'm just thinking there are so many areas that we can work together on: math, space, science, medicine, agriculture. And we just have to have an open enough relationship and call out each other when we think they're wrong, but not put up a total barrier that stops the relationship, that we try to work to fix the problems on both sides.
Thank you. Jim?
Can I just build on that and say, I thought the kind of the slogan of this conference, drive forward together, I think that's exactly what Dan's talking about. We need to work together. We need to continue to build on the relationship and continue to, find ways to solve problems rather than to create more problems. Turn a problem into an opportunity. And I know that everybody in this room, as business people, that's what you do every day. But not everybody sees it that way, so we have to kind of help educate them. It's like in our soybean industry. When we had a problem shipping soybeans to China, we've been focusing on diversification of markets for a long time. We want China, to be our number one customer, and it likely will continue to be due to its size. But our exports, while our exports to China have been down so much, our exports to other countries are up 40% this year versus last year. So I think we all have to kind of prepare for, you can't get too embedded in any one particular market. We have to have diversification and have to have alternatives. And finally, one last thing I heard when I was in China last week that I thought was really sort of cute, I guess is the word I will use. So I was in a meeting with an official, and he was talking about how the United States and China are very different. And then he brought it back to a panda. And he said, well, you know, you look at a panda. A panda's got black and got white. But you put them together, and it's very cute, and it works very well together. And so I took that, I'm sure maybe in the way he said it in Chinese, and I heard it through a translator, but it really resonated with me that while the two cultures obviously come from different places, but you can put them together and they can work very well together and they can be very cute. So let's make sure we all continue to work together to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to say that the volatility that comes to the CME group for the soybean futures, our November volume was up 43%, so there must be something going on out there. And the options was up 72%. So we appreciate those people that use our futures markets, and hopefully the cash markets, futures markets, and the customers and sellers come together. Joe, you want to close us out?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So it's so awesome that we're really getting to talk to each other, culture to culture, people to people. Jim always talks about win-win situations. So Jim and I were in China in June, and it was pretty cold in June in China to the United States representatives. And today, I hope that is thawed out, and look forward to doing business with you long into the future. Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody, and thanks for being on the panel. Appreciate it. I hope this was of some benefit. We appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Thank you. Yep.
Dear viewers, elevate your business to new heights and reach 35 million potential customers with Global Eye Digital. Contact us today at globaleyedigital@gmail.com or info@globaleyedigital.com. Let's take your business global.
Get your brand connected to 2 million readers in USA and 38 million readers in India. Global Eye Magazine, the fastest global American weekly. Our magazine dives deep into exclusive stories, face-to-face interviews, and key happenings across the USA and India, delivering content you won't find anywhere else. Advertise with Global Eye Magazine and reach highly targeted and influential audience. Contact us to book your ad space.